Hi, welcome to our daily encounter. Sometimes in life we enter into difficulties, and sometimes we find ourselves on the brink of having to deal with something that we feel is too difficult for us, that is beyond our ability and beyond our strength. And it's at those times that fear can arise in our hearts, and we can become fearful to the point of nearly breaking. And when we're in these type of situations, there are actually several verses in Scripture that we can turn to give us courage and to strengthen us. One you might think of is Joshua chapter 1 and verse 5, which precedes verse 6, which says, "Be strong and courageous." There in verse 5, one of the bases for Joshua being strong and courageous was that the Lord said, "I will be with you." And so that's a good verse to turn to remember that the presence of God is there with us, no matter what we are going through and what we have to go through. We might turn to other passages such as Romans chapter 8 and verse 28, where we have the promise that all things work together for good for those who love the Lord. That just shows us that, whatever happens, whether in the short term or the long term, this is going to work out for my good, and that can give us some encouragement when we find ourselves in these situations. We might turn also to Hebrews, in Hebrews chapter 13, in verse 5, where it says, "I will never leave you, or will I ever forsake you," so that we can confidently say, "The Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What will man do to me?" And so that just shows that God will be with us. No matter what circumstances we find ourselves in, God is there with us. And these are well-known passages and ones that are used very readily by those who find themselves in these difficult situations. But one that is overlooked and I think is underquoted is found in our reading today in 1 Chronicles chapter 19. Here in the context, Ammon and Aram has come up against Israel. And Joab is speaking to Abishai, and he says, "You know what, he got the mighty men together, and he says, we'll go up against the Arameans, and, you, Abishai, and the rest of the people, you go up against Ammon. If one is too strong, or if the Arameans are too strong for us, then you come help us out. If the Ammonites are too strong for you, we'll go help you out." But in the midst of giving that instruction, Job tells Abishai this. He says, "Be strong, and let us show ourselves courageous for the sake of our people and for the cities of our God. And may the Lord do what is good in his sight." This is beautiful, and this is wonderful, and this is very powerful. This is a very powerful statement to turn to and think about when we enter difficult situations. Not just the part at the beginning where he says, "Be strong and let us show ourselves courageous," but that last part where he says, "And may the Lord do what is good in his sight." One of the things that gives us the greatest courage in life and the greatest strength when encountering difficulties is full surrender to the will of God. When our hearts are free and open and submissive to God's will, that gives us great courage, because if you are surrendered to God's will, you're not really concerned about the outcome, nor are you concerned about what will happen to you, because your ultimate desire and your ultimate goal in the situation is that the Lord will do what is good in his sight. A lot of times we become fearful because we're afraid things won't come out the way that we want them to come out. And so we try to gather courage by maybe telling ourselves, well, God's going to make it work out the way that we want it to. The situation is going to smooth itself out. The Lord's going to help it in the way that we desire. And the problem with that is that doesn't always happen. Sometimes things don't work out the way that we would want them to. And when our ultimate goal is our own desire, that leads to fear, and when things don't work out, it leads to disappointment. And maybe even sometimes in blaming God and turning away from Him. So it can be very dangerous. So one of the best things we can do when we enter into difficult situations is to prepare our hearts to surrender to the will of God. To say, Lord, whatever happens, it is well with my soul. Whatever you have to bring into my life, Lord, it is good and it is right. And I submit to that. If we have this type of attitude, we would have such courage that we never even dreamt we could ever have. Because then there's nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing to shrink back from, because we know that God is working out His will, His plan, and that is our true desire. So let's just think about these things today. I do thank you guys for listening to the video. I love you guys. Hope you guys have a great Sunday. God bless.